The Forlane by Aubert is a delightful, lilting 6/8 dance from the 17th century, originally for the violin, but it works extremely well for the cello. When I've been working on this piece with my own pupils, I've found the most difficult thing for them is to get the 6/8 rhythm really steady, partly because, of course, the challenge is to make it work at all parts of the bow. So from the opening phrase, you have to get a very steady and controlled point of contact, even at the extreme point end of the bow. Doing that and keeping the rhythm very much under control proves to be pretty challenging for most learners. So my recommendation is to start with an exercise on an open string, for instance, a G string, but using the same rhythm of the piece. So that they get the idea of using the entire length of the bow, but also controlling the semi-quaver so that it is rhythmic and not with a mobile point of contact. It's quite a long piece, given that in earlier grades one would be expected to play probably something rather shorter. There is here a challenge of pacing and stamina, keeping that rhythmic and under control for the entire length of the piece is something that needs to be built up very gradually. I think from experience that a lot of children get very tense in the right shoulder because they get tired, and that's the way that it will express itself. So I think building it up in very small sections, possibly 2 bars at a time, is the most helpful way to do it. I think something else that's useful to think about is the bow changes as you cross a string. Those are awkward, and although it's arguably very much part of the canon of string playing technical challenge, I think it's quite a big moment for any learner. This would be true, incidentally, for an adult as well, and possibly harder because adults are much less flexible than children. I think as the piece begins to develop, it's extremely important to get the learner to put in some dynamic variety. It is quite a repetitive piece, and although there are slight alterations in the way that the tune is presented, notably that there are some little trills, I think the piece will live or die essentially on whether or not it has dynamic variety and some life. There are some very expressly written dynamics, but I think it might be an interesting one to get a student to start penciling in some ideas for themselves as well, so that they get the idea that variety is the spice of life. I think it's in the syllabus, there's a request that the first repeat is part of the performance. So it's probably a good idea to get that first section really steady and stable. There's an intonation concerns as well. There's nothing quite as difficult as going from a 4th finger to a 2nd. Your weakest finger, of course, being your 4th finger. Moving over to a 2nd, that interval of a perfect 4th always creates a bit of havoc initially. So I think quite a lot of time could be spent just on this very first section, getting the bones of the piece in order. I generally get my pupils to do their first learning without the trills, because I think trying to get the 6/8 is hard enough initially without adding the... And I think as they gain in confidence, it becomes much easier to achieve that. I think it's a very good idea to also get them to mark out the repetitive nature of the piece. So the first and opening phrase comes back several times, and if they once get the idea that that will divide their workload in half or possibly even more, they will feel pretty encouraged by that. Then I think once the dynamics are in place, it's a very nice idea to get them to feel that the ending can have a pretty triumphalist feel to it. End loud, end proud.